Good morning and greetings from a damp Northumberland on the 13th of July. I'm not going to talk about the Prime Minister's announcement yesterday because there's far too much to digest, and the Church of England is trying to bring some guidelines to bear, and I'll come back to that later on in the week. Suffice it to say, we have a bit of a minefield to negotiate over the coming weeks as we see which way in which COVID goes in our society. And there are real concerns for big services and for things like weddings and funerals as restrictions are lifted. However, I don't want to talk about that today. I want to talk about, with real sadness, some of the things we've experienced and seen on our TV news and in our newspapers over the last couple of days. The country was, I think, pretty well united in supporting the England football team. Even those of us who are not really keen football fans wish them well, and saw in Gareth Southgate and this young team such a positive message about our country and its inclusiveness, and we all wish them well. And most of us, I think all of us probably, were very bitterly disappointed when they lost out in such a tragic way. What we were then encountered with was shocking and horrific on two grounds, I think. Firstly, the low level but horrible level of vandalism and drunkenness and aggression that we saw on the streets of London and indeed in other cities, of people who were taking out their disappointment on others and creating a dangerous situation, particularly in these times of the pandemic. But then alongside this, and tragically, there have been the racial attacks on young players who gave their best, but who didn't score a penalty, either because it was saved or they were off target. But they're kicking of a ball in not quite the right way, in a time of intense pressure and emotional and physical exhaustion, has led to terrible, terrible racist abuse. The situation is that many people now fear that a bid to host the World Cup has been destroyed by these two factors. And our society is facing again shocking levels of knowing that so often people can be out of control and that racism exists and flourishes. It's very interesting that only a couple of weeks ago, politicians were failing to condemn those people who booed the England team because they took the knee, as people say, as they made this gesture of support for the fact that Black Lives Matter, that racism is a scar in our society. And even our Home Secretary said it was okay for the crowds to boo them. But of course we see here where this can lead. Now, what does the church have to say? Well, firstly, the church has things to be proud of and things to be sad about. Firstly, we have to remember that the Christian message has, over 2,000 years, transformed society. And although there have been many, many aberrations, and it took a long, long time, hundreds of years, for the fullness of the Christian message to come to fruition, it is the church, and it is the message of Christ, that has above all said that every person is equal, that we are all the children of God, we are all loved by God, and we are all called to be part of the flock. Now, the church has got it wrong. The church has got it wrong over and over and over again, and we still get it wrong. We still allow latent and prominent acts of racism to occur. We still allow prejudice to seep in, and we are sometimes afraid to challenge it. So we know we're not perfect, but we also know that we are called by God in our world to proclaim and to acknowledge the unique value of every human person. We should look on this situation with shame, but we should also look at the way in which each one of us, and especially those of us who profess to be Christians, can speak out and act out against racism and every form of exclusion. Because if we are not to be an inclusive and welcoming church, then where is the message of Christ in our hearts and in our communities? We should grieve what we've seen and face up to the reality of these fractures in our society. But we should not be without hope. But instead we should continue to walk behind and alongside Christ, to make sure that in our society these wounds may be healed, these fractures may be made whole, and that each human person should be valued. May God bless us all.